Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to move to Article 11, allowed planned development in ID2 zoning district. Is someone here to speak to Article 11?
Hi, good evening, Rick Freiberg from TEC, civil engineer for the project, here speaking on behalf of Article 11. Article 11 is a zoning change that I think we discussed last time we were here that allows for planned development within the ID2 district, and also the key reason for allowing planned development is to do two things. One, to allow senior housing as part of a project within ID2, and the second part of it is to identify the process by which senior housing can be proposed as part of this article. So the way that it lays it out is that it allows project-specific plans to be presented to town meeting for approval before proceeding with the typical planning board special permit process. So if we had our way, we would do as suggested before. We would spot zone the site to make it as specific as possible. The attorneys have advised that we set it up this way because it does, it avoids the spot zoning concern. The other thing that it does is it sets a very restrictive barrier to development where Andover residents get to decide at town meeting within ID2 senior housing is appropriate and where it's not appropriate. And we need to achieve a town meeting vote, and any project within ID2 that proposes senior housing would need to achieve a town meeting vote before proceeding on to the planning board for a special permit process, which is, you know, the second half of that is sort of the typical process. So adding in this requirement of a town meeting vote is a more restrictive process that we're proposing as part of the article. That's a summary of the article. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Anybody have questions on the board?
Do you need the first article to move forward with the second article?
We do, yeah. So the first article identifies the mechanism to propose the second article. So the plan development zoning change, which is the first article, is required to move ahead with the second article, yes.
Okay. When the first time the discussion of PUD was coming up, I thought it was kind of already built in where you could move forward with that. So I know you believe you can, or you believe you need the first one, but the question is, have we looked at that to see if, on the floor of town meeting, if the first article is turned down, could the proponent actually move forward with the second article?
He said he wasn't.
No, yeah, we won't have a legal mechanism to do so.
They won't. He said they won't.
Okay. So if he changes his mind at town meeting and decides to call for a vote, that's...
Yeah, we won't be able to act on it.
I don't think that.
Okay,
So-
I just wanted to hear from town council.
That's right.
I understand what you're saying you can do. I just wanted to hear as to whether it's...
Yeah, it lays out the procedure by which a PUD can be proposed under, which includes town meeting vote. So unless we receive first approval, we can't proceed with a town meeting vote. And then secondly, the planning board would have no authority to hear a special permit for a project proposing senior housing unless it was approved as part of the zoning change.
Okay.
Let me, if I can answer your question, I don't want to get too technical here. I'll refer to the moderator who's in charge of town meeting. They can still ask for a vote on the second one. I don't think anything prevents them from asking for it. They won't. If they do, I will advise the moderator it's probably out of order.
Okay. That's all I need to
And
hear.
it's up to her whether she would allow it. So I didn't mean to flat out say they couldn't.
Right.
They could, but I can tell you now, I'd recommend to the moderator that she rule it out of order, and it's totally up to her.
I agree with that assessment.
Okay, thank you. Two legal questions were raised by town council. I think the one they're in agreement on, which is that you can bring both articles to the same town meeting. There seems to be consensus on that. There. The second question is, the first article will require a 2/3 vote. It is unclear what the second article would require or future conceptual master plans.
I think that has been resolved, right, Mr. Lewis?
Well, it is, what I read from the letters is that it's the developers and the proponents' intent that you would recommend that it be a majority vote, right? Okay. So you would need to, I believe, or it would be recommended that you would amend the article on the floor of town meeting to make it specific that conceptual master plans submitted underneath this new zoning would require just a majority vote.
Yes, sir.
Correct? Okay. That standard would then apply to any other project in ID2 on Dascomb Road or River Road, correct?
Any project proposing senior housing only, correct?
Okay, but any other project that in all of ID2 River Road, the majority standard, because the 2/3 vote has already been taken. So future town meeting votes for age-restricted housing projects would only require a majority vote.
Prior to advancing to the planning board for special permit, yes.
Okay. I want to ask you about the,
You want me to add something to that?
please do.
To follow up on the question you had asked me, Mr. Landry, that does not preclude, and Mr. Foley's attorneys were gracious enough to articulate what it was, their position was as to the quantum of vote for the master plan in the second article, as described in the first. And it said that their intent was majority, and they agreed to make a motion at town meeting floor to make sure, and the thing that I was concerned about was to make sure that there's no doubt about what that quantum is, and the best way to do it is to amend the article at town meeting floor to make a majority. That does not preclude someone moving to make it 2/3.
Okay.
If someone else wanted to make it, or 90%, or
any other-
20%.
Or any other amendment.
Right,
that-
the only thing I was concerned about, from a legal standpoint, I didn't care what the quantum was, I just wanted it articulated in the bylaw so that town meeting knew, when they voted the second one, what the quantum was now and in the future. And whatever the number is, it is, whatever town meeting decides.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is the intent of the developer, the proponent, would be to, on the floor of town meeting, to amend it and to clarify that what you meant was a majority vote.
That's correct, yeah, and we agreed with Mr. Herbalist's interpretation, that's the right location for it, is in that first article, because that's where the process for how you propose it is structured, so it makes sense to incorporate that quantum of vote right there
Okay.
in Article 1.
Okay, and then, but as Mr. Herbalist said, that also doesn't stop a resident from moving an amendment to the article to propose a 2/3 quantum.
Correct,
And so that would be subject to the floor of town meeting.
correct.
Can I ask you about the, in Article 11, you're looking to amend Section 723 by adding the following, and it's called waivers. You're adding a new paragraph to that. And in that paragraph, it appears to be giving the planning board quite a bit of discretion. It says the planning board may waive dimensional requirements set forth in this section for plan developments proposed in the IT2 districts in the interest of design flexibility and overall project quality. And it further moves on to say, or if it finds that such a waiver will allow the project to achieve a high-quality standard, a high-quality design, incorporate a desired mix of open space, etc. So my question is that it seems to be giving the planning board a level of discretion based upon what appears to be a subjective standard to waive provisions under 723. And when I go to 723, I'm not a zoning expert, but if I go to 723 and then follow the tables, some of those dimensional requirements are setbacks, how many stories you can build. So is that what that would give the planning board the discretion to say, even though your maximum you can build here is 4 stories, we're going to waive that because we feel that you'll create more open space if we let you go to 5 stories? Is that the type of discretion they will have?
Yeah, what we wanted to do with that statement was, the special permit process through the planning board is a very iterative, design-based process. There's not only the planning board, but the design review board weighs in on architectural standards and the like. We wanted to provide the board with the tools to be able to shape the development to be in the best interest to meet the character of the town. So any waivers that are sought, there's outlines in the bylaw on how to go about attaining waivers and the thresholds that have to be met to receive a waiver. But the idea is not to make it easier for the developer to sprawl out the development. The idea is...
Every month. Are you kidding?
Some people need this.
Okay, let's,
Okay.
go ahead, keep going.
I'll keep going. So the intent here is that the parcel has some uniqueness to the lot. I'll give you an example. You might not realize that the parcel does not actually touch Smith Drive, as an example. So with the current setbacks that are in place in I believe it's a 40-foot side yard setback. So the nearest buildings would be about 100 feet away from Smith Drive. Our logic, in our case, would be the planning board that, maybe it makes sense to develop closer to Smith Drive in favor of providing larger setbacks to Dascomb Road. And all we wanted to do is provide a mechanism to do so. We're happy to comply with all the requirements in the section as well, and we're giving the planning board the tools and ability to make flexible decisions for design.
But the planning board doesn't have that flexibility. Now, you're giving them that flexibility under this.
That's correct, yep. Well, actually, the planning board has the flexibility to waive requirements, and in plan development that's in the bylaw today, for the central business district and the mixed-use business district, they do have some of that authority.
Yeah, I'm talking about the context of this,
Within ID2.
the scope of the waiver provision, meaning the ability to waive.
That's zoning.
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't that be the zoning board that has that authority, not the planning board?
Well,
Well, the planning board here in the.
But so we're giving the planning board zoning authority, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I guess another way
Zoning
of saying
variance
it.
authority.
that's another way to
saying
say it,
it,
yes.
right?
Yep, that's another way to say it.
Okay, and of course, because this is all of ID2, this means that a future 55-plus age-restricted project up near River Road, with however many units they're proposing, would only be subject to a majority town meeting vote, and then the planning board would have discretion to waive a number of dimensional requirements that currently must be satisfied.
Through their special permit process, yes. Yep, but the criteria needs to be satisfied, yes.
Anything else?
Are we doing 11 and 12 together, or are we?
Yeah, I get a couple of questions on this.
Well,
please.
We're going to do 12 after this.
Okay, so I'll wait for 12.
So I've got a couple of questions on this. One is, if the proponent has stated he intends to amend an Article 10 on town meeting floor, how is it this board can, in good conscience, take a vote on an article as printed in the warrant? I mean, do we even bother? Because we're not going to be able to have a Board of Selectmen vote unless the Board of Selectmen pulls one of those meetings on town meeting floor, to assess it and take a position on it. So this doesn't matter if it's this article or any article, really, where a proponent comes forth and says, I think I'm going to change this to say this because, you could say this, but it changes to be this. Do we take positions on those?
It applies to every amendment.
Right. If a proponent's saying to this board, I'm going to change it on the floor of town meeting floor, should we even be taking a position on the article that's printed in the warrant?
I agree, and I think town council's even
Right.
added the element of that it's sufficiently vague that he's recommending clarification on the floor of town meeting.
So that was the first issue, which I think is more of a policy decision of this board, which I don't think we have documented as a policy, but it would be a good policy to consider. I don't know how we can take a position on an article that's printed in the warrant when we know the proponent's going to vote to amend it.
Well, remember, any article can be amended on the floor, and
Yeah, I know, but
we're
when
left with a dangling.
But if we're presented with a proponent that's stating that he's going to,
We know this one ahead of time.
this
This
is
really different.
going to be amended on town meeting floor. We don't quite know what that amendment is unless the amendment, do we want to be that flexible in terms of, get a copy of that amendment before town meeting, which I don't think we can do.
No, and it goes beyond that, because it's not just the proponent telling us up front they're going to amend it.
Right.
It's town council saying
Right.
it's sufficiently vague that it's going to need clarification from somebody.
Right. So that's one kind of question that I want to raise. I have another.
Just one thought to follow up on that. Amendments can be proposed to any article on town
Oh, I
meeting
agree.
by any resident.
Yeah.
I only raise
The
that.
difference is we know this one is
You know
going
this
to be
one's
amended.
coming.
and
Right,
that's
this one's
the-
coming. Because when you think about it, an amended article doesn't have the support of any board. It's just an amended article. The boards make their recommendations based on what's printed on the warrant.
Correct.
So, I don't know whether the board should get into the practice of making recommendations for articles we know we're going to change.
I agree.
The second issue is, Bob, you did some good analysis of this. Because what concerns me is that Bob had to do that analysis. And this is something the planning department should be coming to us and saying, here are the pros and cons of this zoning article. We have gotten shot in the foot multiple times on zoning articles. Article 40, last year? That was a fiasco. Any zoning article that comes before this board, I want to see, or I would want to see as a resident, the director of planning sitting out there telling us, here are the pros and cons, because he did a good analysis on the cons to that article. You know, the Article 40 article, I know it's last year, but there was some pretty significant cons to that, and that was presented to us as senior housing. So this really upsets me that a selectman has to do this degree of analysis on a zoning article. This is a failure on the planning side, in my opinion.
So,
Plan grade.
Some order here, please.
Along those lines, the drafting of this article was done, I assume, by the proponent's counsel. Was it done in conjunction with our planning department, or did you draft it completely independent?
Drafted independently by our legal counsel.
Drafted independently by legal counsel, so...
We had meetings with planning staff just to kind of outlay the procedural way we're going to go about doing it, but it was prepared by our attorneys.
And honestly, that makes it worse. Because the director of planning, the planning department, hasn't chimed in on this. The planning board, they can chime in on it, but that's a group of residents, that are trying to determine what to do with what's in front of them. But this is the planning department's responsibility, is to ensure that anything that gets presented to this board, to town meeting, is in the best interest of the community.
So the planning board's gonna, they're meeting tomorrow, and they will be reviewing what has been filed on the ID2. It's my understanding they'll begin their review of what is being proposed.
And as part of that,
What about the planning
the
department?
planning
Right.
director will give them an overview.
But
This is
Laura-
premature, then, to
Laura
bring
was
him in
asking-
front of us.
Laura was asking this the right question, which is, it's not the planning board necessarily.
Yeah, no.
Because the planning board, quite frankly, they'll be taking a position on an article that gives them discretion, right?
That would be
Okay,
correct.
so, town manager works for this board, the planning department,
Should be
planning
independent.
director works for you.
Right.
He needs to be advising this board as to what are the what-ifs, what can happen under these articles. It's been crafted by the developer, which they have the right to do, to submit a private warrant article. Taxpayers need representation. They need to have a zoning expert, a zoning council, if you will, and I don't think that's the role of town council, if I understand
Yeah.
correctly. It needs somebody to look at this and say, if you approve this, here are the unexpected consequences you may find. You may find yourself with waivers and provisions that are changing the configuration that whatever may be put in a PowerPoint presentation isn't necessarily what you're going to get. Because the zoning bylaws are going to allow something different and allow the planning board to vary off of that and waive certain requirements.
So no, totally understood. And, the planning director, the senior planner, and the town planner, the three members that compose the planning department, they're not engineers, but what they're doing under my direction is we're facilitating a peer review process from people who specialize in these impacts and will be able to inform the board. So what I'd recommend is that the board put off any vote on Articles 11 and 12 this evening.
Just on that.
But anyway, I would think, but
Yeah.
good.
I mean, on that topic again, you and I have spoken previously, Andrew, about the fact that our planning department really should be doing a thorough risk analysis of our zoning bylaws to determine what can happen, so that we can look at a site and say, oh, wow, there's 10 acres there in the middle of a residential property, residential neighborhood. What could go there? Do you want to modify your zoning to maybe preserve the character of the neighborhood, or do you want to not do that? And that's what I'm really quite disappointed in, is that we've never done that at least to the best of my knowledge, we've never done that proactive risk analysis of our zoning bylaws to thwart the opportunity for these type of developments that don't fit the character of the neighborhood. I'll say I am in support of the Dascomb Road project. I wish we, the town, had more control over it, because I want to support what can have the least impact on that community. I think the project is going to be a good project for for the tax base, but we also need to think about how is it we preserve and balance the character of neighborhoods.
Well, and following up on that, we're making a change essentially to a broader zoning issue here. It's not just this project.
Right,
It's
right.
many potential projects
Yep.
20 years from now, and we need to understand what it is we're doing or not doing. And I think it's particularly hard when it's something like this where there are just little changes to an overall piece that we don't have in front of us, that is part of a bigger piece that none of us are experts on.
We'll certainly have the planning department here at the next meeting.
Can I ask one question on Article 12 before we move on? It says that a copy of the plan unit development master plan is on file at the office of the town clerk. Is that true?
I believe so, yep. It was dropped off, so.
He was, okay, I called the town clerk today, he wasn't available, so you're saying it's in the town clerk's office? Okay.
It's also available on the website, on the task force website, but yes, it's at the clerk's office.
Okay, so that's on the task force website, but it hasn't been shared, it has been shared with the board directly, or?
Not in your Dropbox, we can certainly put it there.
Okay. I went looking for it today, and I did.
The task force has a project page that has a lot of information on there. both-
Yeah, and
both
that's
traffic
fine, the
studies,
task
site
force is
plans.
doing their work, but as a board, we're given the warrant articles that we need to vote on, and we need, if something's referenced in the warrant articles, we need that provided to us directly, and it's being lost in translation here.
While we're on the topic, I'll get off my horse in a second. When we had the discussion on the historic mill district, I get up and I spoke against that, primarily for the density of the housing, 20 units per acre, which I think is way too dense for that area. What I'd like to ask, Andrew, is in light of, I think this board's desire to see more analysis out of planning, at least one selectman's desire to see more analysis out of planning, is I'd like to understand what the ramifications of 20 units per acre in the historic mill district would do. Because it makes me wonder now, have we ever even thought about the traffic implications of that? 20 units per acre in a downtown area. That's a pretty tough area.
That does go through the whole planning process too, though, and special permit process.
Yeah, we know that too, but again, 20 units per acre, what does that mean for
And that will answer
traffic?
That will answer.
Well, just because it goes through the planning board
Doesn't mean it's
process,
gonna
doesn't mean
fix it.
the outcome is going to be what people want. Ask people who are dealing with the outcome of the medical center, Strawberry Hill, and Elm Street. Ask them if they're happy with what happened through the planning board vetting process, and I don't think you're going to get the answer you want.
So if we could have, I'd like someone to say, you know what, 20 units per acre, we're not going to have a traffic problem. Or it can be designed to not have a traffic problem in the historic mill district. I want someone to tell me that, because, I don't believe
The
in that
traffic
density.
analysis is done in every project.
I know that, Paul, but
Yeah.
20 units per acre by right can be done, and if a 20 units per acre is done, we're going to end up with we
If
could
that's
end up with a
what's
traffic
proposed.
nightmare.
But if that's what's proposed, the traffic analysis and a peer review of that traffic analysis will be done.
But as we see, there's always mitigation that, let me mitigate that and then let you put your 20 units per acre in, and I don't want to see that.
If you mitigate, then...
Yeah, what's,
yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. I mean, the authority the planning board has to request mitigation has not necessarily resulted in good outcomes.
Right.
Ask the residents who live in these communities for these big projects. Did they go through the planning board? Yes. Did they have a traffic plan study? Yes. Was it peer reviewed? Yes. Are they happy about it? No.
I would invite you...
We gotta be smarter about
I would
how-
invite you to come in my car and we'll drive around town. Tell me what you hate about the town.
Yeah, no, thanks.
It's not about what you hate about the town hall. It's ensuring that development is proceeding in the manner in which we as a community want it to.
Okay, we're going to defer these two articles for another evening, so we'll put one for the 22nd, right?
That's the meeting I might not be at, but
Are questions allowed? Questions allowed?
Well, we're going to defer them, so that... I want to-
yeah, let's we should still.
They're here.
Yeah.
We should have public input.
Can I finish a sentence?
Sure.
Thank you. We're going to defer these two articles, but if we are quick, if we can move on quickly, it'll be great.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Courtney Driscoll on Carroll Road. We were talking about the traffic study, and I understand that TEC performed the traffic study for this particular project.
Dascomb you're talking about?
Yes, for
Okay,
Dascomb.
Yep.
However, is the town going to do an independent study? Because the TEC traffic report was actually held over a holiday weekend. So it's really not.
The town, the process is that it is peer reviewed by an independent traffic consultant. So
It's underway.
And it is underway. It's paid for by the developer, but the town chooses an independent a traffic consultant to review that, and they typically get together, find out where their rub points are, and work out a plan that is correct for the developer.
And for clarification, in this instance, no town staff was involved in selecting who did the peer review. It was neighbors, people on the task force. They've been contracted with.
I don't think that's the question.
Yeah, that's not the question.
The question is not whether there'll be a peer review, which is an independent look at a study that was physically done during Columbus Day weekend a year ago.
Right.
It is, why wouldn't the town order its own
Right.
Which they said they would pay for.
study? Not a peer review.
During
They said they would happily,
during a
they
non-holiday.
had money set aside.
During a
to pay for
non-holiday.
that.
Yeah, but
Right.
if it's a peer review, the peer review will be taken, will take into consideration what days it was done, the times of day, the weekends, if it was a holiday at all, they'll take into consideration. Believe me, I've been through many a peer review. They are very, very, very critical of the original.
But isn't it odd the traffic study was submitted over a Columbus Day weekend where clearly it's not going to be accurate?
I didn't know that, so you're giving me, I don't know if that is the case, and if it is,
Shouldn't we consider maybe TEC doing one on a non-holiday weekend?
Could you identify yourself, please?
I mean, if it's gonna go through a peer
you
review,
you
sorry.
can't just speak out, you have
Priscilla
to kind of
O'Connor,
be,
6 Iroquois.
you get that?
Why can't we have TEC do one on a non-holiday weekend?
Well,
I would think the task force
Was
could
it
recommend
done on a
that.
holiday weekend?
It was done on Thursday before Columbus Day weekend and Saturday of Columbus Day weekend, which is October 8th, I believe. The data, we're very comfortable with the data, and I think when we get through with the traffic peer review, which is the right person to be answering these questions, I think they'll be satisfied with the analysis. If additional counts are requested, we'll do them. But generally speaking, October is a 2% higher than average month in the town of Andover for traffic. The traffic counts were not discounted, 2%. The other thing is there are permanent count stations set up by Mass DOT, both on Route 125 and on 114, that track historical traffic data, and we've looked at those counts to see if there was anything out of the ordinary that weekend, and there wasn't. So we stand by the counts, but if the peer reviewer decides that new counts should be performed, we're happy to do them.
And the peer reviewer is aware of the dates that it was done?
Yep, they're
Right, so that-
identified in writing in the study.
Okay,
Not a secret.
We'll make sure that the peer reviewer is aware of that, and if the peer reviewer, and I can tell you by experience, they're very critical of the original counts, so if anything further is needed, we'll make sure they get it done. Anything else? Okay, so we're going to defer these to one.
Wait a minute, we have another question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
Keith Saxon, 15 Weathersfield Drive.
Yep.
I had three total questions, one comment or request. Question on Article 11, and Appendix A, Table 1, 3.13, it talks about A4C, ID2 as TM/PB. I know that's town meeting and planning board, but it's a slash. Can that not be an and? Are we talking that both town meeting and the planning board, or are we talking that either or? Because I think it's important that something of any project of this magnitude is automatically town meeting, not either or. That needs to be, I think that should be clarified. So
That is the intent.
That is,
well,
and it's,
intent is everything. This, what ends up in writing.
I understand
is what
that.
Gets interpreted.
A
later.
slash would mean both.
both is the answer, and it's spelled out.
A slash would mean both.
I have read it. I don't come to that again.
I know
I
you
would
have.
request an and, so I'll just leave it at that. The next section talks about ID2 N with the notation B, and the notation B is by right. N in this table is no, not allowed, and B is by right. So those two statements seem to contradict each other. I don't know if
I
that
don't know
can be
what you're looking at,
clarified.
but
I don't know if that's what the intent was. The third item, I know you're on Article 11, but it's together with 12, is it says a copy of the plan unit or development master plan is on file. It doesn't have a date. So if one is on file, we don't know that, it sounds like it was dropped off, but what happens if a slightly different plan is dropped off 2 months later? I think that, this article should have the dated conceptual master plan so that everyone knows what it is.
There's only one copy on file.
But the dates, right, the date, revision dates, I reviewed plans for all kinds of projects. And then the last question, and this is really for the deputy town manager, who we just came from the finance committee discussing a private warrant article, just like this is a private warrant article. The deputy town manager made the argument exactly as Mr. Kowalski and Mr. Landry made, that you cannot vote on a private warrant article over a planned amendment, because you don't know if that amendment is going to actually pass at town meeting, right? It has to go before the floor at town meeting, and town meeting gets to vote on whether to accept that amendment. So how anyone could make, a recommendation based on a planned amendment, I think is a problem. But again, 10 minutes ago, the deputy town manager just made an impassioned plea to the finance committee that they couldn't vote on a potential withdrawal. They couldn't vote on a potential amendment. They had to vote on the article before them. He also cited the fact that there's 100 signatories to this private warrant article that you need to get their buy-in, and that's again on the floor of town meeting. So I can't understand why one private article, that's the standard, and in another private article, it's a different standard. So that...
Was that a question?
It is a
I don't know if there was a
How
question
can
in
you
there,
have two
but
different
if
standards?
Say again? Tell us who you are, and if you're going to speak. Sir? Oh, you spoke out, and I was wondering if you...
I have nothing to say.
Okay, yeah. I thought you did speak, so I thought you wanted to. Okay, thank you.
So, to that point, John, it sounds as though you were advising them.
I was talking about Article 9, which is not related to...
Right, just
it wasn't-
any-
It's not a
any-
zoning article, it was, it had a financial impact. It was about posting information on the website, so...
So this wasn't on Article 11 or 12? Why are you speaking to it then?
Because it was the point of that a board cannot take a recommendation or a vote on a potential...
We already came to that conclusion before you came in, I think, so.
It didn't sound like you deferred. It didn't sound like you...
We
actually
deferred it to another time.
Right.
We wanted to get more
Well,
information.
but
so.
it was an impassioned, it wasn't a comment, it was
All
impassioned.
right.
You cannot, it was an instruction. Right, again, the video will be on tomorrow, you can watch it. So...
Okay.
We'll figure it out.